Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk with Food Safety. How's everyone doing out there?
Hopefully good, because we're all here doing pretty well too. Hello, everyone.
Yes. And if you are listening to us, we love to hear from you in the comments. So when I ask how you're doing, I'm really interested in how you're doing today. And so add your comments because we see them here. So Hal, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you are listening to us. And I know you're here waiting for Lisa because we do have her as a special guest, which we're excited about.
Yes, we do. Tia, I chuckle when you say like, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "Hey, people could even drop an emoji in the comments, like, what's your
Oh,
day like?"
yes.
That's always fun to see.
Absolutely. Smiling face, excited face, dancing because we have a cool guest today. So I would use all those emojis if I had the ability to kind of put them in there. But unfortunately, we don't. So we're just looking at your comments. And we would love to hear where you are listening from as well. So if you are, we're back at home. We've been traveling these last few weeks. So I'm back in Baltimore. Lisa, where are you?
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
Minnesota. Yes. I'm
Yeah,
glad to be back at
About
home
you.
too.
I know. We're just a little bit away. So we're like this morning I woke up and saw the frost outside and I was like, welcome home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I mean, it's been rainy, but it's been a little warm here. Warmer, I guess I would say, in Baltimore. So I'm not looking forward. I like the fall, but I'm not looking forward to the coldness. And you guys are already there, up there.
Yeah. We enjoyed, I think, our last 70-degree weather last weekend or was it this past weekend? Or past week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And then the next, Monday, it's back to
Right.
chillier weather. So, got to start putting things up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, may I
Yep.
take a moment? Alexander, yes, we will have this recording. He just popped a comment in. He has to jump off. So all of our real talks are on YouTube. So we'll make sure we drop a link for you. But absolutely, thanks for joining in while you could.
Yes, absolutely. So if have you been with us through the week? So we started Real Talk this year in January. So it's almost been a year since Real Talk. But so if you've been here, we talk about the weather a lot. And I think it's just because we're virtual from each other. And I'm kind of curious what's happening in other parts of the world and how's everyone feeling. And this is my first year, like one full year in Baltimore. So I'm living in a different climate. But we talk about the weather a lot here. So if you've listened to us, you've definitely heard that. And hopefully you're coming ready to put into the comments how you're feeling from a climate standpoint. But if you are new here, then I would love to introduce us. So I'm Tia, this is Jill, and we are your go-to resource for technical leadership development. So we're really the only organization that's looking at leadership development from a coaching standpoint. And if you were at Food Safety Consortium this past week, you heard me talk about it, you heard Jill talk about it, where we really do feel like coaching is the key to get someone from training, right? Those training of leadership principles to actually the execution of. The road is hard between training and execution. We see it because we've done a lot of training, right? We've been through a lot of training and we give a lot of training as food safety and quality professionals. And we wonder every single time, why is people just not doing what we trained? And it's honestly, it's human nature. And we're on the path and we get off and we have a lot of priorities and there's a lot of things going on around us. And the way that we set up our development programs is really coaching based because that helps people stay on track. It's proven, right? It's proven that that's exactly what coaching does.
It is sourcing our own gifts. It is introspection. It is self-awareness, emotional intelligence, all of those things that, if you look up in Forbes or Harvard Business Review, wherever, even white papers talk all about, these are the characteristics that separate good leaders from great leaders. And that's why, in part, we are thrilled with our guest today, because when we talk about being a great leader, you can't help but think of Lisa. And well, really, Lisa, even in our prep meeting yesterday, as we were sharing a little bit more, and you've done some amazing work and amazing connections with people, and we can't wait to share you with our audience in a minute.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Excited.
we're excited to have you all. We're excited to have you, Lisa. And I say, let's just jump in. So, Lisa, start by introducing yourself to our audience and how you found your way into the food industry.
Wow. Well, first of all, Jill and Tia, thank you so much for having me today. It's just been exciting watching, knowing you individually and then watching you together with Catalyst. And just, this is a topic that I'm just extremely passionate about because, as an ex-QA manager, if I got to make sure that everybody understands at the end of the line what they need to do. And so it's just powerful and exciting to see the work that you're doing with companies to really help them with that. So thank you. And thank you for having me.
Of course.
Gosh, my story. Gosh, where do I start? So I'm a girl from Detroit, Michigan.
Start from the beginning. I like that.
Yes. And interesting enough, I originally wanted to be an electrical engineer. And I tell this story because representation matters. So my mom was just awesome in getting me into all the STEM programs in high school and on the different campuses of U of M and U of D and Michigan State to really just help me. She saw in me my desire to learn more about math and science. And I remember one night her helping me with my science fair project and me getting awards for stuff like that. So I was always interested in science and math and really thought about being an electrical engineer. But then when I went to Michigan State, I went into the engineering building and, back then, and so I'm dating myself, I'm sure that might not be the same today, but back then they used to post pictures of all the graduating classes, right? And so when I looked at all the pictures, I just didn't see myself in any of those pictures. And I thought, uh-oh, maybe I'm not in the right spot, right? So, and as you do with college, you take a lot of kind of your first couple of years of a lot of different classes before you actually get into your major. And I was very, very fortunate to take a food science 101 class. And I thought, oh, I got the trifecta of math, science, and food in one major, right? And so, and then there were several of the graduate students that were in the food safety program. One looked like me. There were several women in the program. My advisor was a woman. And so I ended up just excelling in terms of getting my food science undergrad and then getting a dairy science minor as part of that. I was in the food science club. I was in, like all the different things. I worked at the dairy plant at Michigan State, like making ice cream and cheese for Christmas and all of that. And so, that, and then I was also fortunate too, to get internships. So I had internships with Pillsbury, and some people may remember who Pillsbury was before they were part of General Mills now, but I interned at Pillsbury in R&D. I interned at Vandenberg Foods, where I was a lab technician and kind of a quality tech. And then I also interned at Kraft in Champaign-Urbana. And that was the job that made me say manufacturing was my thing. And so that's, I graduated and then went to work as a second shift supervisor or team advisor, I should say. And the beauty of starting at Schreiber Foods was that they had a excellent program in terms of getting people to go to quality college. And I think that experience of, not going in as a supervisor, but as a team advisor and their high performance work teams really just, I think, set the foundation of my career in terms of helping me understand it's about the team. It's about driving results. It's about connecting with people and getting, working with people to get things done, holding yourself accountable as, because when you're in operations, if the line doesn't make how many cases you need, they're not going to everybody on the line. They're coming to you. So driving results, doing that through people, because when I started that job, everyone had been there longer than I had been alive. So I just thought, what am I going to tell these people? As a rookie out of school, like, what am I going to do? And so I think going into that and, at the time I had some really great advice from my grandfather who was at Ford Motor Company in manufacturing. And it's like, well, what are your goals? What are your objectives? What is your team like? Are they working well together? And so, that and just other leaders along the way, just helping me navigate that. And before I knew it, I was a quality manager and I haven't looked back.
That's
So
awesome.
that's my story and I'm
That
sticking
is
to it.
awesome. Okay, so I'm so curious as you talked about like the different internships, and then
Mhm.
when you did the one with craft, you knew manufacturing was going to be your gig, your jam.
Mhm.
What was it about manufacturing that just drew you in?
Mm.
I think part of it is, I think just being a girl from Detroit, manufacturing is the thing, right? I mean, it's car manufacturing. So I understood what it meant to go in every day and produce something and see what you produced.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then I also was interesting is that what was cool was that my mom had a more managerial type of role in at a manufacturer, and my dad had a manufacturing role, and my dad was actually a quality control technician at Ford. So that was interesting to go back and find that out and go, okay, this was in the cards for me all along, right? But
Yes.
but I think for me, I got a chance to see operations, like watching them talk about the union versus what was going on from a managerial perspective. And then my other internships helped me to see that, did I want to go into research, because research was the Pillsbury role. And I
Mhm.
thought, I don't know that was I mean, I enjoyed the projects. I actually enjoyed meeting the people and going to I actually went to plants to collect data. I love that part. But then
Yeah.
coming back and doing more research and more literature reviews, and I thought, okay, maybe research wasn't for me. I was happy people were doing that, but it wasn't for me. And then I did lab technician work, and unfortunately, I knew that was not for me to be in one place to do the testing. I understood the importance of it, but I thought, I don't know. But then when I was in the champagne plant or craft plant, they had me doing palette pattern studies in the DC section. I was in the oil and paste doing line checks. I was over in the cheese side testing the film of the film for cheese wrap. I was doing all kinds of stuff, and I thought there's just so much excitement and energy in this setting, and that's where I knew that I wanted to be.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I love your story because like you talk so I'm an engineer and I went
Mhm.
into engineering and when you talk about representation matters, I
Mhm.
think that's so big because when I went into school, I ran into people from the National Society of Black Engineers and that almost set me up for okay, I have people that look like me, I have people that come from backgrounds like me, that's where I studied, that's where, they were my crew, especially early on in my college career. And so I think that's so I love that because it really did help shape your
Mhm.
your path.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you were able to see representation in food science at you said you went to Michigan State
Michigan State. Yep.
at Michigan
Hmm.
State,
Hmm.
at the time. And I know it probably have changed at Michigan State now.
Oh yeah.
Um, but as we like, every now and then we do have people that are looking to get into food listening to Real Talk.
Mhm.
And so, for people that's out there that's looking for people that look like them, that's representative of them, like we're examples, right? Just the three of us sitting on this call that there are people out there that are engineers that's in food science, that's worked in manufacturing, that's led groups where, if you are looking to go into any of those disciplines or any other discipline from a doctor to a vet to, there's people out there that, we're happy to connect you with. And there's groups out there that will help you feel welcome. So I think that's a big piece of your story that I wanted to just, highlight just a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say there's a minority and agricultural group now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember starting that or being a part of the initial group at Michigan State when it
That's
started,
Yes.
right? And so to see how that's flourishing, it's just exciting to see that too. And then, obviously the group that you started, Tia, and being,
Mhm.
a part of that. I mean, I think representation does matter. And I think it really just helps people to know that there's other people that they can reach out to have conversations. I think about all the things that I was going through where I got my support from,
Yeah.
right? And so, unfortunately, there were some groups that didn't exist then that exist now. So I'm just excited that people have these type of resources.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
I
I
always
love
love
that.
when we have shows and we're like, we should do an entire show on this, because I think
Right.
about like the diversity, just the diversity in how we look, how we think, all of that is so important in what we do.
Mhm.
And yet I'm not sure where we have all those conversations when it comes to our food safety professional, like our groups. And
Mhm.
so that in itself might be interesting someday to do that.
No, I
Yeah.
agree with you because I think there's the technical side too, right? So
Mhm.
there's obviously the people side of it and representation, and then there's also the technical side of how do you grow your technical capabilities, right? Because there's no one person that knows everything in food
Right.
safety. It's just
Mhm.
impossible, right? I mean, as a leader, I think the smart way to go is to know who you can go to for
Right.
what you may need support with, right? Like when I was at my last role in thermal processing, the process authorities were the ones that really helped because that wasn't necessarily it's not an expertise of mine, but knowing that, okay, this process needs to be validated by someone who understands what
Mhm.
that should look like. You got to get your hand, you got to talk to all the right people. So I think it works full circle, right? It's about getting the technical expertise and help you need and building that in your teams,
Mhm.
or knowing who to go to get that if you don't have it in house, to the other types of organizations like IAFP or I think about like NRA, or just depending on, where you are in the supply or in the farm to fork supply chain, there are groups that can help you with your technical capabilities, but then there's
Mhm.
also the groups that help you just with, your leadership
Yeah.
capabilities too.
Yeah.
Which is really an important aspect because, each of those require us to have some level of self-awareness, that we don't have to be the keepers of all the information, that we don't have
Right.
to do it alone, that there really is this larger community and network that we can and hopefully are leveraging, because like you said, it is so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you got your start, right? You said you hired in as a team advisor, and you it was a great position for you because you really started to pick up on those leadership skills and start to hone those leadership skills. Can you tell us a little bit more on how you built your leadership style
Mm.
while you were at Schreiber, and how that helped you become the leader you are today?
Yeah, I could talk about that. So, um, they had what was called Quality College, and I just remember TQC squared. Thinking, I can't remember what it stands for now, but I just remember it was through a thinking quality culture or something along those lines. And that was kind of my first. You talk about food safety culture today. It was a culture that they built, and it was training that I went away for a couple of days to understand what quality meant, what the resources were, what do high performance work teams look like, what your role was in that, right? And then I came back. Okay, so now I got, to your point, I think, Dia, you talk about, okay, now I got my training. How
Yeah.
do I actually execute this stuff, right? And
Right.
I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. It was hard. I remember going home in tears a couple times because there were either things that I thought should happen just because, like,
Yeah.
I should just demand respect because I'm in this role.
Right.
I'm glad I learned that early that that's not the case.
Who is this girl coming in from
Right?
school? I've been
They're
here.
like, they're like,
Oh,
girl,
you're not the
they're
only one
like,
who stumbled on that one.
yeah, they're like, get out of here, right? So,
Right.
so you go home and you go, okay, what did I learn from that, right? And then different situations would occur, and I would think that it would be one way. And, my plant manager or operations manager would say, okay, let's talk about what happened. And this is a different perspective that you should probably have, right?
Mhm.
So it was okay. So I go home that day, head in hand, going, okay, I learned that. So some of it was literally, they say what 70% of your learning happens by doing. So you take, going into the operation, learning the operation, asking questions. And I think what those tough moments did was just make me pause and say, okay, how do I want to be seen? How do I get stuff done? How do I make sure that we get the results that we need to have? And I've got it, I can't do it by myself. So, okay, how do I actually start thinking about the training I got to get to where I'm trying to go? So, sitting down with the entire team and just kind of being humble and saying, I don't know any of the things that you are doing. Can somebody just walk me through X? And so I remember the four person said, okay, come with me. So I'm gonna put you back here with the cooks and you're gonna stay back there for a while. So I
Yeah.
was picking up, I was a whole heck of a lot younger then. So I was picking up the bags of casein and cutting them into the, and it was a non-union operation. So I could do some of that stuff. And I just kept trying and kept saying, okay, tell me why this is important. And then I realized that I was learning and it was exciting to learn how a product was being made. And I could only learn it from the people who knew it.
Mhm.
So then I could see where their issues were because I had a different set of eyes than they did because they had been doing it for 20 years. So I can say, well, why do you put your case knife over there when you should put it over here? Or why are we using these pieces of paper to help us figure out where we're putting product to be cooled? Can we use a
Right.
computer for that? Right. So, and yeah, that was a big thing back then, right? So, I think a lot of it was just being in the role and just realizing that I didn't know everything, realizing that respect is earned,
Mhm.
making some mistakes, and then just leaving it to the team to just say, I need your help. And here's how I can help you, but I need you to help me help you. And being okay with that and being okay with not being the smartest person in the room and
Mhm.
just walking in and saying, okay, I need your help. And then looking to see, well, why are you doing this way? And asking why. And if you ask why 5 or 6 times, you'll get to, I don't know. And then it's like, okay, now I got a problem to solve. Right.
Right. Right.
And that's how I began to build my leadership style. And I just kept doing that as I got into other, roles. Then when I took over the department, I had a better understanding of what was going on the second shift. So when I took over the entire department, I'm like, okay, I know what's going on second shift. Let me make some comparisons to first and third shift. Let me see what's going on here and see what the differences are. Still asking a lot of questions. I ask a
Mhm.
lot of questions. And then you get to a point where you sit down with everyone and say, here's my observations. Here's what I think we need to address. Here's where we're losing money. Here's where I think that, need to look at our time, our labor. What do you think? And what, impact or input that you have, and then together we can go and make those decisions. And then also saying to people, if you don't like it, don't don't go out afterwards and say you don't like it. Like, if you don't like it, say it now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
just holding people accountable to that and holding myself accountable to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And one piece that it's sort of like underlining in your story is that because you spent time on the floor and you're asking questions and you're learning and you're asking the whys, you're building those relationships.
Mhm.
So when you're ready to take over the whole 3 shifts, right? You have those relationships so that when you say, okay, don't leave this room and complain about it because I'm asking you here, they already know who you are. They trust you. They know that you're there to remove barriers. They know that if they speak up, you're not going to be like, oh, Tia spoke up during the meeting. She's not a team player. You're not going to reprimand them for speaking up. they know that you're genuinely asking because you want to know so that you could help solve problems.
Mhm.
And that takes some time to build those relationships.
Yep. You're
It does.
absolutely right. And I think it also, and that's a part of, getting to know people and treating people with respect. That's just part of my upbringing, right? So I just needed to realize that just because I had the big title, that meant
Yeah.
nothing, right? It
Right.
just meant that you have a job, understand your lane, and understand how all the other lanes interact with you, and then
Mhm.
figure out, okay, how do you get all the lanes to go in the right direction, in the same direction at the same time,
Yeah.
as you need it to,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So you're spot on.
And it seems too that you really led with curiosity. And I think
Mhm.
when we're technical experts, we can feel that pressure that we have to be the answer person. But
Right.
really, as a leader, that leading with curiosity, how that, like you said, that set the tone for how you built relationships, but then also being able then to pair that with your perspective and say, oh, okay, I'm curious about this. Why isn't it working this way? Or how could it be like this? Or then all those other questions come in too. And that really builds that trust and belonging so that people feel more open to have those conversations.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
a
And I
big
think that also led to my problem solving capabilities too, right? My curiosity. So I loved every manufacturing plant I went into. I loved following the process flow, right? Just to see what equipment is doing what, the product is going. I would want to make sure the arrows were right on all the pipes, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, we should be going from here to here. And I would literally follow it as much as I could, because that also led to problem solving capabilities, right? Because when you do have food safety or quality issues, understanding product flow and process flow and what the process is also helps you impact solving any issues that you may have. So I think,
Mhm.
just throughout my career, just being fascinated by how products are made, and being curious about, you know, the piping and the engineering behind it and the elbows. Then you get into sanitation. You're like, okay, that's a dead leg, right? So,
Mhm.
and you can
Yes.
find it because you're walking the system and you understand it. So,
Mhm.
you're right. I love, and I still am. I mean, in my current role, I am fascinated by the businesses that we Ecolab participates in and works with, and our customers, and what some of their issues are and how we can help support them. And so that just it's part of what drives me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, just thinking about your leadership when you first started the industry. How has that changed now that you are, a leader at Ecolab, one of the largest service providers in the world?
Mhm.
Has your leadership style changed, or is it the same? How have you molded it over the years?
Interesting question. I think what's changed is, at least for me, I've, shifting from being super tactical to then shifting to being more strategic, right? So so now I get the opportunity to work with our GMs, our global marketing and comms teams. I get to work with our R&D teams, and I get to see so many different parts of our business. And so my job now is, and it's what I wanted. So maybe I should step back and say, part of, to shift from being in the food business, like making food for 20 28. Ooh, I'm dating myself. But to go, for 28, 29 years, and then to shift to working for Ecolab, I really wanted a seat at the table to really help a organization drive strategy. And I really wanted to utilize my skills. I still wanted to be involved in food safety, but I wanted to utilize those skills maybe in a slightly different way. And so that was part of my thinking about leaving my last role to taking this one. And boy, did I get it. Like, I walked into COVID. So,
Right.
I'll never forget, having the conversations about where my skill sets were, right? Very strong. I felt in food safety. Mm, Maybe on the public health side, I might need some assistance with that. Oh,
Mhm.
Delisa, don't worry about that. We've got people to help you with that. And then lo and behold, we go into COVID and it's like 10 years of knowledge in two, right?
Right.
So that was just phenomenal to not only learn about SARS-CoV-2 and the impact that it had on the world, but to actually have my crisis management skills as a recall coordinator come into play. So you never know when your skill sets will be used for what. And so
Yeah.
literally, when I literally went and pulled out my recall plan that I had, and the work streams ended up being very similar, right? So working with your customer, working internally with what's going, your supply chain, letting your associates know what's going on, working with the government bodies, right? A lot of that's a part of a really good recall program. And so I was able to utilize all that. And
Yeah.
so to get back to your question, a lot of the building blocks that I had helped me understand tactically what's going on. And so what I needed to really hone in on is, and I was doing some strategy before, but here we're really thinking about what do we want to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years? What does that look like for Ecolab? And really trying to understand from each of the businesses that are on their own journey, how can we best support them, right? How can we best support government relations and industry relations? How do we
Right.
play
Yeah.
into that? And so really trying to think about all the ambiguity around that and then try to put that on paper and then being able to, okay, now we have some initiatives that we can go out and execute. So that has been just an exciting endeavor, so far at Ecolab. So, but in terms of changing, my perspective, I think that was probably kind of the shift when you're a QA manager or a line supervisor, you're getting, a lot of the technical stuff as well as the um, operational stuff that you do, someone's kind of telling you that, right?
Yeah.
So I'll never forget being in a plant and you get the directive, go make this happen. And you're like, where did that come from? Why are we doing it that way? Right. And you're
Yeah.
like, I want that job so I can at least see what's going
Right.
on.
Right.
So then I can help, I can make it a little bit different, right? Like, why
Yeah.
are we doing it that way? And then once you get into that job, you go, okay, I've got 17, 20 facilities. I got to get this done. What's the process of doing it? So I can see how things kind of get shifted to facilities. And I
Yeah.
wanted to make that transition a little bit easier. And as you begin to go up the ladder, you start to think more broadly about whether it's the technical issues and knowledge you need to have,
Right.
and how do you broaden that, or if it's your leadership, how do you take all of this sometimes complicated technical information and translate that in a way that everyone throughout the organization can understand. So I think if there's any change for me, it's changing your communication. How do you communicate to the CEO as well as the CEO, the operations person, as well as the second shift worker on the line. You
Yeah.
got a situation that everybody needs to know, but you got to know what each person needs and how to communicate that to drive the results that you're trying to get to. So I think if there's anything that's changed for me is just the expansion of the scope and the strategy of what you're trying to do to get done what you need to get done and how you're communicating along the different ranks.
That's good.
You just described so well the quote about like what got you here won't get you there.
Mm-hmm.
Even though from what you talk about, like everything was such a great foundation and building block to the next role or to the next spot. But really, I think even as you talked about, as you moved in those roles, that broader perspective
Right.
and really like that guidance that was needed to say, like, where are we going? Someone is, like you said, those,
Yes.
those directives are coming down from somewhere or the instructions, but where and how do we do that with being mindful of all the moving parts that are happening and all the people and how to
Right.
involve them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah, and it's important that your leadership changes, right, as you move up in the
Mhm,
organization and as your role changes. Because, like you said, you're now talking to different people. You're now
mhm.
responsible for different things. Before you were the executor, now you're the person that needs to influence the executors, right, so that they
Mhm.
will do the work and they won't stop at like, I don't know where this is coming from. I'm not going to do it, right? So that it's important, even as we talk about our leadership development programs and how do we help leaders step into their roles.
Mhm.
It's important that what you're doing right now as a, like you said, the supervisor manager looks very different than when you step into that director role or when you step into that VP role.
Mhm.
And when you're leading a global organization, right, like that looks a little bit different than if you were, when you were, right, or if you are currently a supervisor or a manager. Key pieces of your leadership is still there, right? And I
Yeah.
thought you explained it really well. I'm like, I'm really the same person, I'm really the same leader, but I have to talk a little bit differently. I have to structure things differently. And I now know more, right?
Mhm.
Because I've
Right.
worked in different roles.
Right. I mean, I will tell you the biggest learning, I had probably was, a couple different places, but I think there is so much that from a technical perspective that right? And sometimes you just want everybody to know what you know.
Right.
And you have to realize that, well, some people only want the Cliff Notes version, right? Some people
Right.
only want the bullet points. Some people want to know the why and what do you need me to do, right? So I think it depends. And then some people need to better understand the why. So as they are in roles that are decision making roles, I think about our operators, for example. They're,
Yeah.
you got to help them understand a little bit more of the why, because they are making decisions on the fly that could impact the output of what you're making, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if I'm talking to a financial person, their understanding of the why is very different, right? And so
Yeah.
they're like, okay, how much is this costing and why, right? And so what you're saying to them will be a very different conversation than even if you're talking to, other people within the organization. So I think if there's anything that you learn, and I think even as food safety professionals, you you influence without authority anyway, right? Like you're trying to get people in across the organization to do things because you want to say it's the right thing to do, but that doesn't always fly, right? So you have to kind of understand and really outline the why so you can influence people in all parts of the organization to what their role is in food safety and why it's important to do the things that we do. So
Right.
it's really about, I used to tell my child all the time, I used to say, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? So listen a lot, right? Listen to what's going on, understand what's going on. And then when you go to, make your pitch or to say to people what it is that you need to say, if you've heard them in the way you should, you can respond back to them in a way that they can hear you and understand.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think that also goes into Nikita's question. So thanks for
Oh.
asking this question. So Nikita asks, what are some tools or reminders that you use to keep from doing everything yourself?
Mm.
So as food safety and quality professionals, whenever we outline a gap, there's typically an undertone that we are going to be the ones that close that gap, which even if it's not food safety and quality related.
Uh-huh. And we're
Yeah.
laughing with you on that one, Nikita. We get it.
Right. Right. We're like,
Yeah.
you guys need to do this. And they're like, oh, are you going to close that gap? And we're like, no, 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 not me. You need to.
Right. Wow, that's a good one. That's another lesson I learned the hard way. Where I was doing, working longer days, more hours, and realizing that once it began to impact my health and my personal relationships, I realized something's not right here, right? Because all the gaps, like I now, not only am I now doing the food safety, I'm doing quality, which I expect, but now I am doing wastewater treatment. I'm doing, warehousing, like because here's where the gaps were, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think part of it is, sometimes, and I know it's hard in this environment because of the labor issues that we're having,
Mm-hmm.
but part of it is staying true to um, knowing what you're supposed to be doing and where you need help,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that was a big lesson I learned in that I'm thinking, any organization is going to let you do as much as you want to
Mm-hmm.
do,
True.
right?
Yeah.
True.
So if you don't pause and say, wait a minute, this task or this body of work needs to be done by someone else, if you don't hold true to that, you will just absorb that task, and
Mm-hmm.
that is going to create exhaustion and frustration. So that's one thing, is to recognize in yourself that this is a job that takes 10 people, not two, right?
Yes.
And look at it and assess it the right way, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and and fight for that. I think the other piece too is it's about the team, right? So depending on what the gaps are, like if you're doing audits, internal audits, and you're finding that here's these gaps, what types of teams are you forming internally to help you navigate that? Sometimes we want to put everything off on whether you call it the HACCP team or, for your food safety plans, the teams that you put together. Um, I think you need to make sure that you're engaging other people as part of the process. So, as an example, when I'm not going to be the one to do the internal audits, I'd like the supervisor to do that, or I'd like somebody else to do the actual audit.
Mm,
And
yeah.
then, and maybe I'm walking around with them. And when they take ownership of that, then they begin to see where they begin to be more engaged in how the gaps get closed, right? Like
Mm,
they can figure out or work with other people to determine the best way to close a particular gap. So those
yeah.
are a couple of tips that I've used in the past to really just help me not be so we're always somewhat overworked, but I think sometimes you have to step back and recognize for yourself that um, it may take more people or more resources to do what needs to be done. I mean, I think about in an operations processing line, you always sit down and think about, okay, who's going to be the
Mm-hmm.
operator? Like, how many people is it going
Right.
to take to do this role? Why
Yes.
wouldn't we do the same thing in food safety and quality?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot, sometimes the answer to that is because we are taking on all that work when really we should be telling, I mean, if the organization only wants to hire 2 people for a 10-person job, that's them. I just can't be those extra 8 people.
It's
So it's like
not a BOGO. It's not a buy one, get one free thing.
Right. Or get
exactly.
three.
Right,
Right.
exactly. Yes. And like,
Mhm.
Neil also commented, like, he made that mistake when he was younger. And I feel like we all
Oh, we
do
all have.
until we get to a position and we're like, oh my, like, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember very clearly, during COVID, things were kind of like piling on my plate, right? So much so that safety was starting to be added. And I'm like, look, I don't know that much about OSHA regulations, and I'm not about to go to jail over OSHA regulations, So I'm like, I cannot be your safety person. So you need to hire
Yeah.
a safety person,
Mhm.
right? Because like it got to a point that I couldn't take on that because I really just did not have that technical background.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of made me think, even in the moment, like, would I have taken that on? Would I have taken on a whole nother role, before I like broke down and was like, okay, I need to do 0 roles at this point because I just need a break, So I think that's something real and a lot of people deal with, especially in food safety and quality, where things can be piled on our plate because it's like, oh, give it to food safety, give it to food safety. And we're trying to be valuable, right? Because we've learned over the years that, oh, we're a supportive operations, we're a support function, and we need to show our value and we need to do all these things. And so we want to show our value, but that
Mm-hmm.
leads to being burnt out and overworked. And eventually we leave those type of organizations because, like Neil said, that culture it's not the right culture.
Nope. And I'm just going to plug workload capacity there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There are actually, and there's definitely tools that help us translate that into like an actual number and to say, this is how many hours this work takes. this is what
Mhm.
I'm willing to give you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what we agreed on when I started about what my workload would look like. So
Mhm.
let's start here.
And
So
you'll be surprised if you did a workload capacity study. Like
mm,
surprised, I remember when I was overworked and then everyone was like, well, let me know how many resources, how many hours. I looked back 2 weeks
crazy.
and I was working 60 plus hours a week because of my workload was so heavy. And I'm like, I didn't even look back. Okay, what was I doing, 2 months ago? And I literally took the last 2 weeks and said, okay, how many hours have I been working? And it was I think one thing for me where it was like, man, you working all these hours, but you should actually be working over here at these
Mm,
risks. And so the fact that I was needing to cover some things over here and still being overworked, but the things that I saw as major risks weren't being covered, like that's a lot of stress,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stress on, especially in food safety, where we know if something goes wrong, someone's going to be sick. Someone's going to be, someone might die from our product. There's going to be a recall. Like these are the things that are on our shoulders that,
Mhm.
um, can put a lot of stress on us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Lisa, I'm curious, that kind of, I think, ties into yesterday. We had such a rich conversation around how you approach like some of that workload, right? Because there's always going to be so much. But what does it look like? Because we talked a lot about kind of this legacy leadership. In fact, I think we have a great book or podcast name for you. But I love how you talked about your approach because we do face that type of culture where there's
Mhm.
always so much work. And sometimes we feel like we haven't made a lot of progress. So, would you mind sharing a little bit of that with us? Like how I don't know if it's how you balanced it, how you kind of set the tone, but how you kind of worked in that space so that you could feel, you know, successful or accomplished or like you whatever that was and also for your teams.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. We talked a lot the other day about legacy. And
Mhm.
for me, it's always about a couple of things, right? So if I leave a role or an organization, I always want to leave it better than I started, right? So what am I, and I want it to be sustainable. So if I'm
Mhm.
doing work within the organization, if we're building food safety plans, okay, I'm not the only one that needs to know about this food safety plan. A lot of people need to know about this plan. So engaging people in it to make sure that it's sustainable and that people understand the why behind it. So that's a big piece for me is I want to make sure that, whatever we're doing, yes, things will evolve, but you want it to be sustainable. Um, and then the second piece for me is it's really about engaging with the team in a way that they feel good about and they're empowered and feel good about the work that they're doing, right? So you talked about what work should you be doing and the workload piece and not doing the more critical things versus things that may not. I mean, I love it when people have the capacity to learn new things, right? You always want to learn new things, but at the same time you really want to make sure that your basics are done and so your priorities are done. So really working with people to understand what are the key priorities. I always used to say, food safety, and I learned this from wow, ex Pillsbury person too. Food safety is kind of it's. I always kind of say it's my call, or it's like I think people can rally around food safety and say if this. Well, most people. I know there's been some cases where that hasn't been true, but in general, most people and most food companies say if this is a food safety issue, we got to stop. We got to make this right. But then when it becomes quality issues, it's more of a business decision. So we got to talk through what that looks like. And so, in order to do that and be comfortable with that and have people trust you with that, you've got to be able to work with people and make sure that your perspective is heard, but also their perspective is heard. So I do a lot of coaching and mentoring and getting people to see and feel empowered about the things that they do because their opinion matters. And I'm not going to be, I will tell you, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then we got a problem because that means that we're missing a voice into something that we should probably have as part of our conversation. So, if we're going through some sort of technical issue or some sort of problem, do we have all the right voices at the table, to help us resolve those type of issues? And so I think a big part too for me is being a technical leader and just breaking it down for people to understand the pieces that they need so they can be empowered to do the things that they need to do. So that's been my style. I was very fortunate, like I said, to have kind of started off that way and just continue to, be curious. And I want to, just make sure that what I'm leaving people with matters and that it is sustainable. So that way, if I walked away or, somebody else walked away, what they had left was enough for them to continue moving forward and to then begin to make their own changes with a really rock solid kind of baseline that they're starting with.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does. It does. And I think it speaks to the legacy, right? That you're able to leave that legacy behind and say, hey, this is sustainable. We've worked it up to here. Like now you go forth and you build it. Whether, I remember when we were talking as we were prepping, you were like, whether it's you leaving the organization, right, for another opportunity or you're going on vacation. Right. And the team really can use it. And they don't always have to, man, we can't move forward without Lisa, or we can't make a decision without Lisa. It's more like, no, this is a sustainable program that you can use today. You can use tomorrow when I'm gone on vacation, and you can use 5 years down the road when I have a different opportunity.
Right. I mean, if you, I tell you now, if you have to call me on vacation, then I have done something wrong.
Right.
Lisa, I think that's a perspective that we need to get the message out more about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I know as we work with people, a lot of them are like, well, I still like to check emails and I still want people to call if there's something going on. And we understand being kept in the loop, but that importance of being able to step away. And I think the bigger part, like you said, is have we created programs that are sustainable, that people have adopted as their own? And have we built that level of trust and empowerment with our team?
Right.
Right.
Because when they know that you have their back and that you trust them to make this decision, they will.
Right.
Right.
But it's when they hesitate and they're not sure on those things, where they either don't have the right information or they're not confident that you'll be there, that they tend to step back and look for you for that guidance.
Right.
Right.
And that speaks to culture, right?
Yeah.
That's culture.
I was just going to say that I think is the crux. I mean, I know that we've named it food safety culture now, but that's really what it's about. I can't, I mean, like I said, if you have to call me on vacation, that's problematic. Then that means that I haven't left you with enough tools and enough comfort and confidence to be able to do what it is that you need to do, to be able to let me take a moment from all the hard work we said we've been doing, probably more work than we're supposed to just give me a minute to decompress, relax, and then come back to the good fight. Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, I don't want to say it's problematic, but I think it's definitely an area within our industry that, where people feel like it's all about them, and it just can't be, because I mean, I need to sleep at night. So I need to know that everybody knows what they're supposed to do, so I can at least sleep for a few hours at night and then we come back at it the next day. And if you can't do that, and if everything relies upon one person, what happens when that one person leaves, or that one person chooses to do something else, or, or something even that you don't even want to talk about, right? So if an organization is dependent upon that, then if, as a food safety professional, the culture has to be that we're all in this together, and I've got to leave you with the right tools and the right and hopefully you feel confident and the right information to allow you to be able to do things and to keep it moving.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. I love that. I love that because it's so important. So if you are a manager of people out there and you cannot go on vacation because your team quote unquote needs you, let's talk because there's something going on and you need to
There's a gap.
be able to disconnect, um, because it cannot be all about you,
Mhm.
Right.
right? It cannot be all about you if your organization is going to grow, if your team is going to grow,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, but you got to find a couple people within your team, right, to grow them. Like that's the key piece, right? To
Yeah.
have a backup or a couple of people that, especially, I think you got to think about too. Think about the two or three things that you need people to fill in for, right? You always want to make sure that whatever your recall plan is, everybody's clear about that because that's going to be, if there's anything that's going to be a problem while you're gone on a Friday afternoon, it's that,
Right.
right? The second thing is, when you think about your critical, I was going to say critical control points, but your food safety, your preventive controls, right? You want to think about, okay, who's managing that? And if something along that goes awry, who can help problem solve those things, right? And so that's where bringing in your supervisors, your production managers, your maintenance managers, and also with your quality team to talk about, okay, if we're having a problem with that, what would Lisa do if she was here? Like think through it that way, right? But
Yeah.
don't call her, but what should we be doing? What's the best decisions that we need to make? So
Right.
those are the things that um for me, leaving that, when we talk about legacy, leaving that behind from whether you're leaving or to go on vacation or you're leaving for your next role, you want to make sure that everybody that you're leaving has the tools that they need to be successful.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I, I
Great.
think
Well, I know we have a couple of questions out there. Hal asked a question around the differences in technical leadership as a system matter expert in a large enterprise versus business management. You talked a little bit of a difference there. I wanted to know if you had anything else to add.
Um, in terms of like being is it more like a technical expert at a large enterprise? I mean, I think it depends on the role you have, right? I mean, I'm still a subject matter expert, but I'm in more of a strategic role, right? So I'm trying to work from a business perspective to understand what the businesses need, and then from a technical perspective, be able to provide and support that. I think when you're in a smaller organization, sometimes you're rolling your sleeves up with, like I could think about my last role where you're kind of rolling your sleeves up and you're at the plants, you're talking to the managers, you're talking to the teams, you're
Mhm.
helping with problem solving, you're doing some of the training yourself,
Yeah.
so, I think about when FISMA came out, I brought all my QA managers together to become PCQI trained together and then
Mhm.
go out and do your plans. And then we got teams that are come to each location to help review your plans. Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I think it's just there are differences, just in terms of, what you may be doing depending on your role. But I think definitely smaller companies, you tend to have lesser resources. So you tend to reach outward to like companies like you and to Hal's and to, Tag and to other places to just help you with, even the large companies, though I should say, are still using some of the same thing, some of the same people. So, it's that networking piece, right? Like you don't know everything. You got to
Mhm.
find the people that can help you, regardless of the size of the organization. You got to find the
Right.
people that can help support you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I
In the
think
last, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and Neil, thank you, Neil, for being here. He's got a great question that I think will be a good wrap up for us.
Okay. Is this Neil Bogart? Oh,
It's Neil
Yes.
Bogart. He's like,
hey
he's
Neil.
asking, what is one
Hey,
thing you wish,
Neil.
Lisa, what is one thing you wish you knew when you were starting in food safety that you know now? So if you could go back and tell yourself something in the beginning of your career, what would that have been?
What would I tell myself? Um, I probably would have told myself network a whole heck of a lot more than
Mhm.
I did. Then I do it now a lot more, But I think I probably would have told myself, be more engaged. I think I was very much working on what was going on in my facilities and not necessarily networking as much and learning, like working with IAFP or doing some of that stuff early on. I think I would tell people today, jump into, like, if you're in college, jump into that stuff now, right? And make that a part of your process a lot sooner than maybe what I did. I didn't start joining some of those things until maybe a lot later in my career. But I would probably say, recognize that there's so many resources out here now than maybe as I got later into my career.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one, because I think people kind of put networking to the side because, yeah, they're busy. They don't want to, they don't want to go out and
it's a small industry. I mean, I shouldn't say small, but I would say that you will bump into people constantly, right? And you're like, okay, where are you at today? Right. And you can burn a bridge really bad, or you can reach out to people for support. And so I think, especially now, that I, am doing a lot of things that I'm doing today, I'm reaching out to a lot more people just to help me understand, what are our customers' needs? What are our business needs? Like, when you're building a strategy, you can't just do it in a box. Like, I need to know what's going on. And so knowing all these people to just kind of help inform your thoughts and your process is definitely something that, if I was to tell my younger self, I would say be more engaged, like in some of the organizations. I would have kept being more involved, maybe in Manra at the time, or kept being more involved in IAFP or some of the local, because some of these groups, IFT, they have local organizations. I would have probably been a little bit more involved in that sooner, because then that could have informed even more of what I was doing from a leadership perspective.
Right.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Lisa, it has been just a pleasure, a joy to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom and giving us some good laughs too.
Yes. And honestly, we could extend this for so long. So we know that we're going to have you back on our show because, we love learning from you. Your leadership is known, right? Like, people know who Lisa is and your leadership style. And I think people are drawn to you. So we appreciate for you shining a little light here on Real Talk.
Yeah. Thank you. Anytime. I can come back anytime.
Awesome. Well, thank you to our audience as well. Thank you for your questions. We do go back and look and add links and those type of things. So please continue to add as you're listening, even if you're listening on replay. And as Jill mentioned earlier, we do put all of our episodes up on our YouTube channel. And then we do want to also put up our email really quickly so that you guys can reach out to us if you do need us. We talked about a lot of great things today, and we are, we're open for your emails, for your questions, what you like to hear on Real Talk. We're open to all of those things. So please shoot us an email.
You bet. And, and if today listening to Lisa, you're like, I feel inspired. Like, I am ready to kind of look at leadership a little bit differently, or I know that as I move in roles that I want to start developing those skills that Lisa talked about so that I can navigate through operational and tactical and strategic. That's what we do. And we love helping people navigate through that. So check out our website. We're at foodsafetykatalyst.com. Our first program, Technical Leader Bootcamp, is opening for January 26th. We're kicking off the year having 14 weeks of doing this together and laying the foundation. So join us. Or if you know someone who needs to join us, send it along.
Yeah, we're excited about that one.
Absolutely. So thank you again for being here. We love having you. And we will be back next Wednesday, same time, same place, for another episode of Real Talk Food Safety.
Talk to y'all later. Bye.